Hello there, and welcome to another edition of Unstoppable Mindset from wherever you may happen to be. We are really glad you're here. Today, we're going to talk with Kevin Clark, who is one of the developers of an app called Blessn, and we will talk about that. Kevin and his colleague met 20 years ago backstage at the Academy Awards. Of course, what I want to know is, did they walk out with any of those guest bags? But we can get to that. But anyway, so they met. They've been fast friends ever since. And along the way, a lot of things have happened. And I'm going to really leave it up to Kevin to talk about a bunch of that. So, Kevin, thank you for being here and welcome to Unstoppable Mindset.
Thanks, Michael. I appreciate you having me.
Well, so why don't we start? Tell us about the early Kevin growing up a little bit. Let's start with that.
Certainly. I grew up in Oklahoma City, and came out to California to go to USC and the film school there. I think, like a lot of people, moved to the West Coast thinking about movies and all that stuff. And I got a job at actually ABC Television, which parlayed into a job backstage at the Academy Awards. And I've directed talent backstage at the Academy Awards for decades now. That is actually where I met my business partner, Gerald. And honestly, since I've met him at the Oscars, we've been business partners and best buds ever since. It's kind of like when you find somebody you really gel with, you feel real lucky. And we are, many, many businesses into our relationship.
So the Oscars have grown a little bit, at least, since they started, in 1928 or 29 at the restaurant, and a few people were there.
He said, wow, you know your history, yeah. I think we are about to do the 98th Academy Awards.
That's what I thought, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I collect as a hobby old radio shows, so I don't have that first one because it wasn't broadcast, but I do try to keep up with some of the history and know how it's grown over the years. In the last 20 years, how do you think that the Oscars have changed?
Oh, man, I love that question. And I would want your perspective too, Michael, because, somebody who works backstage, I see everybody that's participating, and then I try to watch all the films ahead of time. I will say my perspective is somewhere around the year 2010, something changed at the Academy Awards. Now, it was the movies being nominated or pressure on the Academy to diversify what they're nominating. I don't know what happened. Or maybe it could just be the types of film Hollywood is interested in making. And then therefore that reflects on what's nominated at the Academy Awards. But I think something changed fundamentally where the Academy Awards are not as exciting or even as accessible to ordinary people as it used to be. I mean, films like Braveheart and Ben-Hur and Lord of the Rings, Return of the King, these are huge spectacle movies that everybody loved. And I think they've really kind of steered away from that. And as a film lover, I do still enjoy the films that are nominated, but it is not what it used to be. Mm-mm. What do you think?
I agree. It's not. I'm still sort of amazed that one film, was it Sinners, I guess, got 16 Academy Award nominations. That's amazing.
It's a lot, yeah. And that is actually a big spectacle film. So in some ways, I think that's really cool that it got nominated that much. But also, I didn't actually like it that much. So I don't know. I don't know what the appeal is. Now, if my business partner was here, he would definitely side with it's the best film ever made. But for me, I don't really understand it. I'm not a vampire guy, so I don't know. Maybe that's where it just lost me.
I don't know. I'm still with Casablanca being the best film of all time, so that's okay.
That's a good pick. That's a good pick. Yeah. I mean, I think also even 2000 to 2010, you had Gladiator and Lord of the Rings, Return of the King. Yeah. And there was a few bad ones in there like Crash. I don't know if you remember Crash, but I think it's generally considered the worst best picture winner of all time. but still there was like a general, I don't know, big spectacle Hollywood
Yeah.
thing that made it all accessible back then.
Let's see. The English Patient won one year, didn't it?
Think 97, I
Yeah,
think.
I never understood how The English Patient got an award, a Best Picture, but it did.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, there's a famous Jerry Seinfeld joke, the Seinfeld show, where Elaine goes around admitting she doesn't like The English Patient. And I think a lot of people resonated with that.
Yeah, I never really saw a whole lot in that, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Of course, I like a lot of different movies. I personally believed that The Godfather deserved the award that it got. I actually sold some technology to Francis Ford Coppola in 1983,
Oh,
and
wow.
I knew at the time they had had The Godfather and Godfather 2, and he said that he had another Godfather in the can that eventually was done, but
Mm,
still, then the next year after The Godfather was The Sting, which I thought was a great movie. That was very clever.
yeah. Yeah. I haven't seen that since I was a child, but yeah, I
I
remember
know.
loving that. Yeah,
Now,
I think Godfather 1 and 2 are what generally considered some of the best films ever made, right?
and understandably so. Now, on the other hand, how come Young Frankenstein has never won an Academy Award? That's another story. But
Well, that's the why isn't comedy a part of the Academy Awards? I think that's a good case to make. And I think comedy is a very, very difficult thing to write, direct, and act. So
yeah,
if you land it, like you should be awarded. But also, right now, Hollywood's output is only 5% comedy.
yeah,
We really steered away from it. Back in the 2000s, it was 20% of what Hollywood did was comedy. Now we're down to 5%.
yeah, yeah. It's amazing. There's so many different things, and of course, movies like Star Wars that had so many uniquenesses about them were just
Mhm.
never included or nominated either.
Yeah, I think there are some films that Hollywood thought were going to be relevant decades later. And I think Hollywood is very bad at predicting
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
Because, of course, Star Wars is very relevant.
sure.
But English Patient, heck, even
Nope.
you could even say Forrest Gump is not culturally relevant anymore, you know?
No, but it was a whole lot better than English Patient. But yeah,
Yes,
you're
it
right.
was.
And 2001: A Space Odyssey and all that. But well, so the Oscars go, and I guess there are reasons why they do what they do. Sometimes the hosts of the Academy Awards are some of the best parts. I mean, Billy Crystal has always been so funny, and Jimmy Kimmel and so on.
Yeah. I think a really well produced show is entertaining, even if the films that are nominated are not. You know, I think if they put together a good show, it's still worth watching, even if you don't see Sinners and Marty Supreme and all that.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's kind of one of those things where we see a lot of swings, and I'm sure that over time it will move again, and we'll have to have this discussion again in 5 or 6 years.
Yeah. No, I'm very curious. This year they have 10 Best Picture nominations.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think I only saw three of them until this point, and I have a lot of catching up to do. Yeah, I think a lot of it is films that people really haven't seen.
Yeah. And I'm not sure totally what I feel about that when they have movies that most people or pictures that most people haven't seen or won't see.
Yeah.
What does that say? I'm not sure what it really says about the whole state of the art of the Academy, but
Yeah. And it
nevertheless,
could
that's the way it
be,
is.
maybe it's not their fault, you know? I mean, it could be the demise of the mid-budget film is playing a big part in this. We don't get a lot of 30 to 50 million dollar features anymore.
Yeah.
You get the mega budgeted superhero film or you get little tiny budgets, but the mid-budget I think is probably where a lot of these nominations used to come from. Again, who knows? I could be completely wrong, but I think if we could pump some money into, like you just said earlier, the comedies that we used to have, maybe we see the quality overall go up.
Could be. Now, a couple of years ago, Coda won, and Coda wasn't that large of a budget movie, was it?
It looked pretty small, yeah. But I mean, I think that's kind of where it's gone now, right? It's like kind of a smaller budgeted film does seem to rise to the top these days in terms of the award season and what people clamor for.
I guess over the next month and a half, we'll hear lots of analysis, and
Yeah.
we'll see what we can make of it all. Well,
Yeah.
going back to you and Gerald, so you became good friends at the academy backstage, and then what did you guys do?
We actually had a lot of ideas back in the beginning. Some of them were not very good. Like we started a business to take books that the universities no longer wanted and take them off their hands and then resell them online. I think we sold 2 books. And to this day, we still have a garage full of books from 17 years ago. I think it's collecting spiders in a big pile in my business partner's garage. So we did a lot of things where we would, in our heads, it made a lot of sense. And we were positive we were going to make some good money. And I would say that we struck out 90% of the time. And it was fun. I'll say that. We had a lot of fun trying. But I think if you're thinking about being a business owner, I think taking swings and racking up a lot of misses is pretty important. But it took us a while. I'd say 6 years ago, we finally did well with our businesses we were pursuing. We started opening homes for developmentally disabled people, which mainly means autistic folks.
Mm-hmm.
And we opened a series of them in California. And we've had a lot of fun, and we have had success doing it. That is also one of the most challenging things you can imagine. I mean, the headaches
Sure.
They never stop coming.
Are you familiar in California with the regional center system?
I sure am, yes.
Yeah. My wife was president of the board of the Orange County Regional Center many years ago, so we're familiar with it.
RCOC, yeah.
Yeah.
How many years ago was it?
Where are you located?
I'm currently sitting in Aliso Viejo, which is actually in Orange County.
I used to live in Mission Viejo off of Muirlands and Alicia Parkway.
Yeah, I could drive there right now. I know exactly where that is.
We'd probably lose our connection, but that's okay. I understand. When was it? Oh, it was probably in the mid 1980s when she chaired the board, and maybe it was a little bit later than that. And then in 1996, job transferred me to the East Coast, and so we moved to New Jersey, and we're there for 6 years.
Okay. Yeah. Did she go back into that world on the East Coast?
No, she wanted to quilt and do other things. She became a professional quilter and made quilts for people, and started a quilting guild in Westfield, New Jersey, where we lived, and wanted to do that and had a lot of fun doing that. She was in a wheelchair her whole life, so she did spend a fair amount of time at home, especially in the winter, because snow made it tougher to get around. Mm-hmm. But she could drive and did drive and drove in the snow.
Oh, okay. So a quilting guild. What is a quilting guild?
It's a group of people who all have an interest in quilting, and sometimes they take on a project, or they all just have their individual projects, but they get together. In her case, they got together at our house at least once a week, and they quilted and visited and talked. And so she made a lot of friends that way.
Oh, wow. That's really cool. And is that what her hobby had been up until she made it more of a professional thing?
Somewhat. She had always been interested in sewing and other things like that. She did cross stitch, and she did counter cross stitch for a while, and then that graduated into quilting in 1994. And then we moved back to Westfield, New Jersey in 1996. So she had a lot of fun with it, and did that for the the time we were in New Jersey, and then continued it when we got back out to California.
So you're presently in California?
I'm in Victorville, so we're just up the road from you a little bit.
Okay, yeah. Up to 15, right?
Up to 15, yeah.
Yep, been there a few times on the way to Vegas.
Yep, that's what it is. we moved down here in 2014, and I grew up in Palmdale. And when I was growing up, as I always describe Victorville, it wasn't even a speck on a radar scope compared to Palmdale. But when we came down and were looking for property to build an accessible house for Karen, couldn't believe it when we discovered that Victorville had 115,000 people, and it's actually grown since then. So it's
Oh,
crazy.
wow. Yeah, I think Victorville became the spot for a while there for people who were like in the heart of LA and wanted to get away from it all. I think Victorville became kind of hot for a while, especially
Yeah,
in the late 90s.
yeah. I expect that's true. It's still kind of a stopping off place on your way to Vegas.
Yeah, yeah, it is. And it's for people who don't know where Victorville is, it's in the middle of the desert on the way to Vegas, and
Right.
it is hot.
It is hot. And in the winter, it's very cold, but we don't get a lot of the snow because we're only about 2,850 feet above sea level.
Hmm.
And so we get the cold air, but Wrightwood, Big Bear, and all the mountains around us get all the snow. And that's fine with me.
Yeah. Yeah, I do remember years ago I was a salesman and I had customers in Victorville. And I remember thinking it was colder than I expected it to be
Yeah.
because you guys have that harsh wind. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of that wind every year. And of course, last year when we had the big fires, we didn't have any of that here, but we still had a lot of wind
Oh,
and lost a couple of trash cans in the wind. Unless you went outside and grabbed them as soon as the trash people came to empty them, you were apt to lose your trash can.
oh, that's funny.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of crazy. So you and Gerald kind of continued to do things. I'm sort of amazed that more people weren't interested in a lot of the books, and you weren't able to be more successful with that. That's kind of strange.
Yeah. I don't know what moment in time we were doing this, in terms of the transition from maybe physical copies to digital. I have no idea. But we had this one book, and it was literally one book, and it was going for $1,000 a pop. And we had like
Wow.
four. So of course we thought, oh my gosh, we're gonna be awash in money. And then we sold no other book. We just sold that one for $1,000 a
Gee.
pop, 3 times, I think.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's kind of crazy, but even so, but it is kind of interesting that people wouldn't buy.
Yeah. Maybe we were dealing with kind of an outdated set, Who knows? I don't
Who
know.
knows? Yeah. So they're still in Gerald's garage, huh?
They are, yeah. There's a huge pile, and they're covered in spiders. So I think one day,
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to go over there and help out, get rid of those. I can't imagine it's safe either. I mean, they've got to be dried out and all sorts of dangerous at this point.
Yeah, I would think so. Well, so it
Yeah,
might be time.
might be. Yeah.
So what did you guys finally do that clicked and started you moving forward?
Well, I think success builds on success. I guess, like we had so many strikeouts, and we even produced a TV show once upon a time, and it was one of those like very upper end of the cable dial channels, like like 1,100 sort of thing.
Hmm.
Like nobody ever found
Nobody
it.
goes to, yeah.
Yeah, but we produced a reality show about a suburban mom trying to reclaim the excitement of life, and we had fun making it. But also, it almost killed us. It was the pace with which we had to sustain production, post production, and then planning the next
Hmm.
was unsustainable. And at the end of it, we actually didn't make any money because the lady who was selling our ads didn't keep track of anything. And then she quit or got fired or something. And they couldn't figure out what to pay us.
Hmm.
And so they just lowballed us. And I think the number that we ended up getting paid was like barely covering what we spent, maybe even less. So after that, Gerald came to me and he said, "Hey, man, what do you think about another TV show?" And I said, "Absolutely not. There will be no more TV shows." And then he says to me, "I've heard of this thing where you can help, developmentally disabled people by providing room and board."
Hmm.
And I thought, man, that is unexpectedly out of left field, but let's try it. So we started the process. Took us years to get approved because
Yeah.
outsiders coming in, they were like, "Who are you guys?" and which is fair. So we took years to get to know the people in the system, gain their trust, and then they allowed us to open our first home, and we built up from there. And then out of nowhere, Gerald calls me and he says, "Hey, I'm really tired of social media, especially doom scrolling. It's all a big bummer. Everything I look at is just, either they're trying to sell you something or they're trying to get you angry."
Yeah.
He says, "What do you think about a faith-friendly, positive, community-based social media?" And I don't know what I was going through, but when he pitched it, he took like 3 minutes to pitch it. And I said, "Man, I am sold. I am 100% in. Like, let's do this." And I did not know what I was signing up for. It was a heck of a process. If anybody's ever had the thought, "Man, I have this great idea for an app," like, yeah, that's step one of 1,000. And
Yeah.
and the next 999 steps are brutal. So we started this 3 years ago, and it has been exciting, but woof, it is a challenge.
So exactly what is it?
So we are faith-based social media. So if you've got TikTok or Reels, it's very photo and video oriented, but we've really geared it towards the Christian community, and we've got a lot of people using it literally just to inspire other people. Like, hey, face your day, it's a beautiful day, or they can be even quoting scripture over it. And then if they gain a following and they choose to, they can actually monetize. What they do is they put up a pricing for if you want a inspirational message sent to you for your birthday or for your friend's birthday, you can choose one of these influencers on our app and actually book them and say, "Hey, a video for my friend's birthday or for my daughter's graduation," or whatever. And then that video will be delivered and you can, share it with your friend or just save it for yourself. So we're trying to kind of combine these two models because one of Gerald's insights was there is not a way for Christians who are influencers to monetize. Not really. I mean, if they wanted to, I'm sure they could figure out some way to do it, but there's not an easy, accessible way to do it. So his insight was maybe if we offered that, people who are currently being, say, demonetized on TikTok might be intrigued by us and come over and join this family. And so far it's working. We only rolled out 2.5 months ago, but so far we're doing well.
How many subscribers do you have to the app?
It's in the thousands.
Wow.
My project manager is currently moving from London to, I think, Dubai. So I don't even have the most recent numbers as of early January. I don't know what we're up to.
One of the advantages and nice things about apps, though, is you don't have to be in one particular place necessarily to have an influence over them or keep them going and managing them, because it is all virtual anyway.
It is. Yeah. I think one of the things that we figured out early was if you have an idea for an app or some technology, you're going to find a company in America that says, "Hey, we can make that for you. Here's our price," and it'll be a lot.
Mm-hmm.
What you don't know is they are actually delegating this to people all over the world.
All the world, yeah.
So if you know that ahead of time, you can do the same yourself. So we built a team like London-based, but like our coders and developers are everywhere. They're Canada, they're States, they're sitting in Taiwan, they're everywhere.
There's something to be said for Fiverr.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So we did not use Fiverr, but yes,
No,
that is a good resource.
Well, it's interesting. When the pandemic began, I was encouraged to and began writing a book that was published in 2024. It's my third book. And the title of the book is called "Live Like a Guide Dog, True Stories from a Blind Man and His Dogs About Being Brave, Overcoming Adversity, and Moving Forward in Faith." What started the book was the idea that people are going to be so fearful because of the pandemic, and they're going to be worried about things that there's no need to worry about. If you follow the rules, you stay locked down, you stay a little bit away from a lot of the rest of the world for a while, then you're going to be okay. But But people fear so many things, as we learned while we were studying all the different aspects of fear. And the colleague who wrote it with me, Carrie Wyatt Kent, and I did a lot of looking at fear. And one of the things that we learned is that over 95% of the things that we're always afraid of are things over which we have no control. And all we do is worry about all these things over which we have no control. And the result of that is that we just continue to be more and more afraid, and we condition ourselves to fear rather than worrying about just the things over which we can control. And while we may be aware of the rest of it, don't worry about it, because you're not going to be able to do anything about it anyway. And so that was kind of the premise of the book. What we used as the basis for it was lessons I learned from my 8 guide dogs and my wife's service dogs. Service dog. Things like we what if everything to death. Dogs don't what if anything. They live in the moment. They don't fear all that other stuff. And if we could learn to do more of that, we'd be a whole lot better off.
Yeah, I think living in the moment is a huge challenge for most of us.
Yeah. But it doesn't need to be, but it's a choice.
Mm. So is the premise that fear is a choice?
The things that cause fear is probably more of a choice. Fear is partly a physical reaction. It's an emotional reaction, but you can choose to learn to control fear and I won't say totally overcome and eliminate it, but you can learn to control it. You can learn to use fear as a powerful tool. As you may know, I was in the World Trade Center on September 11th, and the reason that I was able to escape was that I learned all I could about the complex. I learned what to do in an emergency. I learned from fire people, Port Authority, police, and others, all that I could about the building. I learned where things were, so I knew how to get around the World Trade Center, and needed to know all of that on my own, because I couldn't rely on other people when there might not be somebody around when such a thing was needed. So I really needed to know it. And I was the leader of an office, so it was important for me to know all that stuff so I could, for example, take people to lunch somewhere and get them there, especially when a couple of hours later we were going to be back in the office negotiating multi-million-dollar contracts. How would it look if I said, "Oh, I don't know how to get anywhere. I'm blind. I can't see, and I can't get anywhere"? That wouldn't work. So I needed to know all of that. But what happened is, as I describe it now, a mindset kicked in on September 11th because I knew what to do and how to do it. And the result was that I didn't allow fear to overwhelm me, but rather I used it as a way more to keep alert and listen for the creaks in the building in case suddenly it sounded like it was going to collapse all around me, which it didn't do. But still, it was a matter of learning that you can control fear and you can use fear as a very powerful tool and motivator rather than it being the negative thing that most of us tend to believe that it is.
Yeah. Well, can I ask you, I imagine that was a very fearful state of mind. When it was happening, did the people around you understand what was happening?
No, nobody did.
Okay.
Of course, people always say to me, "Well, you didn't know because you were blind." Excuse me, but that's not true at all. The last time I checked, Superman and X-ray vision are fictitious and were and still are. The fact is the airplane hit 18 floors above us on the other side of the building. And as we were going down the stairs, I was smelling an odor, and I finally identified it as the fumes from burning jet fuel. And I observed it to all the people around me who said, "Yeah, we were trying to figure out what it was that we're smelling. You're right, it's burning jet fuel." But nobody knew what was going on.
Oh, wow. So you deduced, you deduced that it was burning jet fuel, not because you'd been told anything, but just through your smell.
Right. And so from that, we figured out an airplane must have hit the building, but we still didn't know it was a terrorist attack or anything like that. But the reality is that the whole idea behind fear was that fear for me was a tool that I used to be alert and used it to be able to draw conclusions like that and to help other people as we went down the stairs and keep other people focused.
Yeah. So is that like when that happened back then, did you consider yourself a pretty like in charge of your fear and able to manage it already? Or is it something that you explored after that day?
Both. I was able to be in charge of it and and control it. Um, I love science fiction, and I got to tell you, I had an imagination that was thinking of things that were a lot worse than anything that happened. Although we never expected the building to fall, but
Yeah.
still, I was able to control my fear and my thoughts, and I used that as a way to keep focus as we went down the stairs.
Mm.
So I was able to do that because I'd learned to do it. And it wasn't just from that day. As I tell people, I'm pretty used to surprises in a lot of ways. For example, when I lived in the Boston area, boy, sorry about that,
Oh,
but
you're good. I'm
in the
suffering the same thing.
yeah, in the Boston area, at the time it was the place where there was the highest accident per capita rate in the country, and I could be walking down a street and suddenly, when I expected a car, well, let me go back. The way I know what to do when to cross is I listen to the traffic, and if the traffic is going the same way I want to go, then I'm going to cross the street. If it's going across in front of me, probably not a good idea to walk out in front of one of those cars. And as I tell people, that's what a master's degree in physics taught me, you know. But the
So
bottom
you're
line,
able to distinguish
oh
just
yeah,
from like the Doppler effect and all that, like
well you
what
have to.
direction things are.
You have to be. You know, when you're blind, that's what you do. And so I could listen, and when the lights changed, the traffic would be going the way I want to go, and so I would cross. And at the same time, I'm listening, and suddenly I'll hear a car coming up from behind, and it turns, or I hear a car coming from my left that thinks it's going to make it through between other cars that are going the way I want to go.
Hmm.
And suddenly I'm in a position where I have to decide, what do I want to do? Do I want to back up, or do I want to try to run across the street? So I'm used to surprises like that. And so those kinds of trainings helped me a little bit on September 11th as well. So I'm kind of used to a little bit more dealing with unexpected and unusual situations. And so it just got better over time, and certainly was well affected and used on September 11th.
Well, when that happened, can I ask? Um, Obviously, everybody was in the dark in terms of what had just taken place. Like, what did you hear and feel during the impact and right after?
So when the building was first hit, it literally tipped in one direction. And I had known that the building was constructed with expansion joints so that tall buildings like that can be buffeted in the wind. And I've been in the building when there was a windstorm or a heavy wind, and it would shake a little bit and would rock back and forth.
Hmm.
But when the plane first hit the building, we didn't know what was going on, but the building tipped in one direction. We moved probably about 20 feet. And then it
Wow.
came back. And almost immediately, my colleague from our corporate office, who was in to help with the seminars we were going to be doing that day, David Frank, looked out the window and started shouting, "Oh my God, there's fire and smoke above us. We got to get out of here." And of course, I kept saying, "No, don't panic. We'll get out. Don't worry. We got to get out of here right now." The problem was, and he eventually used the big line, "You don't understand. You can't see it." People do that all the time, of course. The problem was what he wasn't seeing, which was I had a dog next to me, a guide dog. And Roselle was sitting there wagging her tail and yawning and going, "Who woke me up?" And I knew what Roselle was like when she was afraid, and she was exhibiting no fear, which told me
Oh,
whatever was going on wasn't such an imminent threat that we couldn't try to evacuate in an orderly way, which is exactly what we did. Now, of course, it could have changed at a moment's notice, but the bottom line is that all I could do would be to control my own being and my own thoughts and focus, because the rest of it isn't going to do me any good to worry about. If the building's going to collapse, it's going to collapse. So that, other than imagining all sorts of things that could be going on, but not letting them overwhelm me, I was able to continue to travel and function and do what I needed to do.
so you were on about the 50th floor?
78.
78th. Oh, wow, I was way off. So how long was that descent? That must have taken hours.
It took from the time from the time the plane hit until we got outside, it was an hour.
Okay. And then after that, how long until the collapse?
About 45 minutes for that building. We
Okay.
got out at about 9:45, and Tower 2 that was hit first collapsed at about 10:04, 10:05.
And you'd walked out at 9:45.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we walked over to Broadway and walked north on Broadway, so we were 100 yards from Tower 2 when it collapsed.
Oh, wow. But you still must have heard and experienced the entire collapse.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But you know, the issue is that we can control fear a lot more than we think we can. We don't need to let fear overwhelm us, and and there are things that we can do to deal with that. And one of the things that I talk about in Live Like a Guide Dog are things that we can put into practice, like, for example, when things don't go the way we expect during the day, rather than fearing it, rather than thinking, oh, I just lost, I failed, rather instead take time at the end of the day and analyze what happened. Analyze why were you afraid of that? What are you going to do to make sure that doesn't happen again? What are you going to learn from it? And if we practice doing that daily, the fact is we can learn a lot more about overcoming fear and scary things in our own lives, and learn how to focus on the things over which we have control rather than everything else.
I think that's amazing advice for people. And what do you think how do you think that applies, considering all of us are pumped very, catastrophic news constantly.
Oh,
If it leads, it leads. And everybody everywhere is convinced that the end of our country or the end of the world or whatever is near. Like, how would you advise people as they're going through the day absorbing all of this?
I just go back to what Mark Twain once said is, I wonder if God invented man because he was disappointed in the monkeys. Seriously, I think the fact is we've got to develop a mindset that says we need to focus on what we can control, because the rest of it we don't have control over. And we can worry about that and drive ourselves crazy, or move on from it. And that's, I think, what most people really need to look at.
Yeah.
Well, how would you answer that? That's it's a good question.
My answer is very simple. You should stop doom scrolling and start faith scrolling on Blessn.
Yeah.
I think we're one of the solutions, I hope, to this very problem. But I think about this problem a lot because I have friends who are constantly getting worked up by the day's news. And I get it. There's a lot of catastrophizing out there.
Yeah, there is a lot, but again, if you start faith scrolling, as you put it, the fact of the matter is you're working on focusing on what you can control, and if you do it and you do it enough and you adopt the appropriate mindset, what you're going to be able to do is to go, okay, I have the faith, I have the knowledge, I can deal with this, and I don't have to worry about it because I don't have any control over it.
Yeah.
Put it back in the
I think
hands of
that's
God.
great. I do think it is easy to worry about the exact things you don't have control over. I think that's the appeal of politics, is for people to spend their time worried and worked up over politicians they absolutely have no control over.
Yeah.
Situations they don't even interact with. So I think people do spend a lot of their days doing precisely that.
And all they do is worry about things that they really don't have any influence over. And another way to look at some of it, let's take Donald Trump. A lot of people now are grousing and complaining, but he was elected president, and he is the president until enough people decide to make a choice and vote in somebody else. But you have to start by learning about different people and making intelligent decisions. And I think a lot of people made a very emotional decision with him, but he's still the president now. And that's the way it's going to be for another, almost 3 years. And so the bottom line is that what we need to do is to focus on doing the things that we can to continue to function and stay alive, and hopefully making a difference.
Yeah. I read something the other day, and maybe you addressed this in your book. A lot of the emotional responses we have, anxiety, depression, or whatever, can be alleviated simply by putting a couple of wins in, the win column starting early in your day.
Sure.
And they can be simple, small goals achieved very early in the day help to alleviate that stress and anxiety that maybe you otherwise would have felt about your own life.
I think
Do you talk about that?
I don't talk about that specifically, but I agree with what you're saying. But again, I also think that it's most important that we take time at the end of the day while we're falling asleep and analyze the day and talk about even the things that went well. What could I have done to make it better? And the things that didn't go well, I didn't fail. But what do I learn from that? Because if you really take the time to do that, one of the things that you'll realize is that in reality, you're not your own worst critic, you're your own best teacher, because you're the one that has to teach you what to do and how to deal with issues.
Yeah.
And the more you take time to personally analyze what you do and what goes on during the day, then the more you'll learn. And it also comes down to what I also talk about, which is learning to listen to that inner voice and using that to teach you what to do. My favorite example of the whole inner voice concept is Trivial Pursuit. How many times do you, when you're playing a game of Trivial Pursuit, somebody asks a question, you immediately think of an answer, but then you go, that was too easy. And you end up using a different answer, but the first answer was the correct one. And we need to learn to listen to that inner voice.
Yeah. I think right there is the difference between good test takers and bad test takers.
Yeah.
I remember when I was in high school, sorry, my dog is barking. I don't know if you can hear
okay.
that. When I was in high school, for some reason, I learned that early to almost speed my way through tests. Yeah, because the first answer that popped into my head was typically the correct one.
Yeah.
And I would get done with tests so quickly. And I thought I'd found some sort of cheat code. And I guess I really had.
Well, I don't think it was cheating, but you found a code that you learned and you used the knowledge because your inner self picks up on all that stuff that we tend to ignore.
Yeah. 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 I remember I'd sit there and everybody else was taking twice as long to do a test. And I didn't know what intuition was or any of the things we just spoke of. I was like, well, I guess the faster you go, the better off you are. But yeah, that was I think that was the only reason I ever got through tests, even when I hadn't studied. Oh, I've got a dog licking my face right now. All right, relax.
Don't worry about what you can't control. It's okay.
She is excited to show me some love.
She says, "Let me be involved in this discussion." One of my general science teacher in my freshman year came in one day. Well, there are two things that he did. One day he came in and he gave everybody a test. He said, "Pop quiz, read the instructions, take the test." Nobody, and he came over and he was going to, and he didn't want to give me the test orally because he told me that the instructions said, read all the questions before you start answering. And people didn't do that. And they went through the whole test. And the last test question was answer only question 1, which is your name. And so, I learned from that. I thought about that, about paying attention to details. But then he came in one day and he told us a story about an instructor who, in a college philosophy class, went up and he said, okay, I'm going to, actually it was the final. And he said, I'm going to write the question on the board and then you can answer it. And when you're done, bring up your paper. And he said the professor wrote on the board and then everybody started to write. And this one kid wrote he sat for about 10 seconds. Then he wrote something. He went up, handed in his paper and left. And what the teacher had written on the board was, remember, it's a philosophy test, right? So the teacher wrote, why? And the student wrote, why not? And turned in his paper and was the only one who got an A on the test.
You're kidding. That's funny. Somebody else write because?
He didn't say that they did. I wonder if anybody did, though. But
that's funny.
But I learn from those kinds of things, and what I learn is you pay attention to details, you learn to think. And I had physics professors in college that always said, pay attention to the details. And I always took that sort of thing seriously.
Mm.
Well,
Yeah,
you know, go ahead.
I think I haven't. I think most of my adult life, I really did ignore details for the bigger picture.
Mm,
And what's fascinating is my partner, business partner, Gerald, he is very detail oriented. And I'm a bit of a, I don't know, space cadet. I like to think about the problem for days until my subconscious delivers some answers. And there's something about that pairing, the detail oriented guy and the dreamer who's just thinking about things for days on end. Somehow that works really well.
there you
So
go.
I do always wonder if it's one founder of a company, he's got to be all the things, you know? He's got to be the big picture guy, the minutia guy, all that. So I don't know that without my business partner, I'd be doing any of this, honestly.
Mm-hmm. The other part about that might be could you learn to listen and maybe get messages or information a lot quicker and not worry about it for so long? That's something to think about.
That could be, yeah. I think one of the things that I've enjoyed about getting older is you do slow down. You don't
Yeah.
get amped up quickly.
Yeah.
And I've noticed the more I've slowed down, excuse me, as I get older, the more I pay attention to the details.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
The more it all kind of comes and makes its way in.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, talking about Blessn again a little bit, a lot of different apps and platforms that are out there say they have positive vibes. What makes Blessn different?
I think for us, we really did try to cultivate a community. So I would say a lot of the people who join, and I don't really even know how this started, but they start every video with, "Hey, Blessn family." And it really has cultivated a feeling of community.
Mm,
And going into the comment section on the videos, everybody is really supportive and upbeat. And because everybody's kind of starting from the same place of faith is central to our lives, I think people have a trust built in immediately. You know, it doesn't feel so much like you're interacting with strangers from the internet.
yeah.
So I think there's a trust that just happens there. And don't get me wrong, if another app has good vibes, that's great. I'll check it out too.
Sure. But I think you raise a really good point that trust is extremely important. And
Mhm.
one of the lessons that we talk about in Live Like a Guide Dog is while dogs love unconditionally, they don't trust unconditionally. They're open to trust, which we generally are not because we've been allowed, well, we allow people to teach us not to trust, but we're not open to trust like dogs are. And so if we and dogs really click, we learn to trust each other. And the problem is that just doesn't tend to happen nearly as much with humans. And what we should do is to learn a little bit more about trust ourselves.
Yeah. Like what advice would you give a young person on that one?
Well, smile, be open to trust. Now, if
Yeah.
somebody comes along and you're trying to trust them and they prove that they're not trustworthy, then you move on and you don't deal with that person. But on the other hand, don't let that tell you not to try to be open to trust in the future, because there are a lot of people who really do want to develop trusting relationships.
Sorry. My dog is losing it.
Uh-oh.
Hey. Hello.
She says, I trust you to pay attention to me and forget that other guy. What kind of
She's going
dog?
nuts. Pomeranian, 6
Wow.
months old.
Okay.
Yeah. Hey, Willow, chill out. Chill out. Chill out. Come here. She must have
So-
heard like a school bus dropping off kids or something.
So a lot of creators
manner.
are getting squeezed and payouts are dropping and so on. How do you tend to succeed with Blessn and people are still
Yeah, I
able
think
to make
that-
some money?
I think with TikTok and some of the others kind of squeezing the creators out of money, I think it is kind of a obvious thing to switch to a company like ours where you can monetize on the first day. You don't even have to build up a base or a number of clicks and views because of that feature where you can offer personalized messages that people can order. So I think, corporate social medias are really, they're pressured into obviously maximizing quarterly profits, as all companies are that are public. But where are you going to take those profits from? Probably their creators, their influencers. They're the ones getting the shaft.
Yeah.
So ours will never be like that, simply from the nature of, hey, you can set up a profile and monetize the first day you do this.
What got you going down the road of faith being an integral part of Blessn and what you're doing?
I think that was really Gerald. He wanted that familial aspect, and he wanted it to be for like a specific group of people, and faith is important to him. So for him, it was a natural thing to make it around the Christian community, a faith-based community. And when he pitched it to me, I liked it immediately, because if we're talking about our faith, we're not talking about politics or, the catastrophic news or whatever. So I think I was drawn to it immediately because of that simple fact.
Do you find that there are people maybe from other religions that are as deeply involved in Blessn?
Not yet, honestly. We were on a podcast in Africa, and we had a bunch of folks join. None of them became creators, though. So I would have been so curious to see, if some Muslim folks from Africa were going to start posting, and how people in America would react to that. But so far, we haven't seen that. We're very early in this journey. So someday we'll see different faiths interacting, and that'll be, I think, if people can keep it respectful, and I think it could be very interesting to strike up some interesting dialogues.
I would hope that that does happen, because so many of the precepts of most religions are really the same. And I would think that there are ways that people can learn that Blessn might be good for them as well.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I forget how the adage goes, but basically they're saying if you want to avoid fascism, travel, get your population to travel, see the world.
Yeah.
And I think we can all interact now on apps where we can interact with different cultures and faiths, and that could help expand everybody's mindset. Post 9/11, there was a knee-jerk reaction for us in America to be scared of the Muslim community. But if anybody's traveled to Istanbul or someplace that's heavily Muslim, they quickly find out these are ordinary family-oriented folks, and it's a very inclusive faith as well.
Yeah.
So I think it would be very interesting. Me as a Christian and the person who opened this app, I'm happy that I've got a big Christian community growing. But I do think it would be interesting to see people interact with other types of people.
Well, maybe the time will come when you'll have an opportunity to really dialogue about that at other churches and so on. Because I think it would be great to have it embrace more people, but that's a growth issue, so it'll happen.
Yeah, we're 2.5, 3 months old, so we'll see where everybody that uses it takes it.
What's been harder about building Blessn than when you first started? What have you found is harder than you thought it would be?
Oh, definitely the development cycle. When you first come up with an idea and you Google, let's say, developers, you're going to find business after business in America saying, we can make this in 6 months for X amount of dollars flat fee. And of course, as somebody who's never written a line of code, I believe the people saying this. And it turns out that is nonsense. You're not going to get an app built in 6 months. You're lucky if you get it in a year and a half.
Yeah.
And it's not just because your developers are slow. They're hardworking people, but there are so many unexpected things that crop up. For example, in your head as the creator of this app, you might be thinking, oh, I want it to function like this and that and the other. But you have somehow failed to convey that to your development team. And you might have expected them to read your mind, but they're not mind readers. So you have to iterate for a long time to get it to a place where it can be rolled out to the public. And then after it's developed, you're going to beta test friends, family, people off the internet you find, and you're going to immediately see a lot of shortcomings in your app. And that's 6 more months, 6 more months of development, quality control testing, and then rolling it out again. And in reality, it's never finished. You just kind of have to get it to good enough to show the public. And you really have to make a judgment call. Like, is it now good enough? And I think me and my business partner probably disagreed in terms of like, one of us thought it was ready, the other didn't. But we rolled it out anyway. And then the public started interacting with it. And immediately we found 50 things that needed to change or be adjusted. So yeah, the process is not what I expected. I really did believe all these salespeople when they're like, yeah, in 6 months you'll be showing this to the public. No way. There's no way. You'll be lucky if it's 1.5 years, 2 years.
The other part about that, though, is when you did open it to the public and you found 50 plus things that needed to be dealt with, how many of those do you think you would have thought of without offering something to the public and getting that opportunity to get feedback?
Yeah, I think some of it eventually you would catch on to, but you need outsiders' perspectives. People complaining like, hey, I tried to do this and it didn't work as expected. Or, hey, I don't care for your interface. We got a lot of people just telling us what they didn't like about it. And that is such good feedback.
Yeah.
Especially if you've got a really talented group of developers. And people call and say, hey, do you mind if I give you feedback? Or they'll email, And we'll say, can we get on a call and talk to you? Yes, let's do it.
And the reality is that, especially if you get a lot of people who are saying the same things, that probably means a lot.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. And a lot of it is simply, me and Gerald and our developers, we're a small group of people. We haven't tested it in every conceivable way that you can test it.
Right.
But the public will try to break it. The public will find the limits.
Yeah.
So you do have to turn it over to them and invite that feedback.
Yeah. And there's a lot of merit to that. I have a friend who is a great app and tech tester, because if it can be broken, she's going to break it. Not intentionally, but she will. It's just
That's funny. So she is quality assurance. Is that what she's doing?
Sort of. It turns out that way. So, what is your experience about how people feel after they've been using Blessn? By the way, we should tell people Blessn is spelled Blessn.
It is, Blessn. Yep.
How do you find people, and what do they say about how they feel after they've been using it just for even a few minutes? Are they reacting very positively pretty much to that?
Yeah, I actually had a really funny experience with my own girlfriend. She had never really played with it until a month ago. And I said, hey, download it, jump on it, and tell me what you think about XYZ. And so she did that, but she was also going into the comment sections and leaving comments and interacting with people. And she put her phone down and she said, I feel like I'm part of your community now. And she laughed. She just expected to be another tester for me, but she ended up having like dialogues with people in the comment section. And I thought, okay, we're on to something. Like, this is doing what we thought it would do.
Which is cool.
Yeah. I think anytime you can facilitate people talking and encouraging, especially, like you've done something good.
Yeah.
I think if you go into the comment section on TikTok, you'll see a lot of people making jokes or fighting or arguing. And I'm sure there's also some people encouraging, but for the most part, That's not what the comment section on TikTok is
Mm-hmm.
for.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been happy to see on our app, people are using the comment section to be positive, and I'm really thrilled.
And that's pretty cool. So
Yeah.
if we're having this conversation in a few years and Blessn has just really taken off, what does success really feel like to you? What would you call successful?
Gosh, there's so many metrics, but I would say just for me on a personal level, if I was meeting with Gerald to discuss and like things on the side that Blessn could be doing as well, if that's charity work, if that's opening a little like entertainment studio, then I'll be like, okay, we have grown this community, and it's allowing us to reach out to people in new, different ways. I think that I'll know that we've done something pretty special.
Mm. So is Blessn primarily what you and Gerald do these days, or do you still deal with homes and so on for persons with developmental disabilities, or what?
Yeah, we still are. We own those homes. We have a very experienced senior staff managing it. So we're not consumed by it, but we still, have meetings on the daily basis to talk over issues and solve them for those homes.
But you're able to devote a lot of time to the app and
Yeah,
doing what you can to make it synergistic to the world.
yeah, yeah. We are lucky in that. We are.
Well, Kevin, this has been fun. We've been doing this, can you believe it, for over an hour.
Yeah, yeah.
Time
Michael, I
flies.
appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Well, I really appreciate you being here, and I want to thank all of you for listening to us and watching us. If people want to reach out to you, how do they do that, Kevin?
They can always email me, kevin@blessn.com, or they can jump on the app and interact with me there. I've got a profile there as well.
Is it available on Android and iOS?
You got it. Yes. Apple and Android. Yes, it is.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I hope people will reach out. If anybody wants to reach out to me, please feel free. It's speaker at Michael Hingson, MICHAELHINGSON.com. Wherever you're listening, please give us a 5-star rating. But even more important than a rating, please give us a positive review. We really appreciate your reviews. And people who are looking for podcasts to listen to always like to see what people are writing about them in terms of reviews, because that is what makes them want to listen or watch a podcast. So hope that you'll do that. And of course, for all of you, including you, Kevin, if you know anyone who you think ought to be a guest on Unstoppable Mindset, please let us know, introduce us. We're always looking for people to chat with. So again, I want to just thank you for being here and for being a part of this and letting us have this wonderful conversation, Kevin.
My pleasure, Michael. Thank you so much.
If you're ready to go deeper into the ideas that shape how we see ourselves and others, I have a free gift for you. Head over to michaelhingson.com and download my free ebook, Blinded by Fear. Keep learning, keep questioning, and keep choosing to live with an unstoppable mindset.